Hello. Okay, so I thought this video is really cool and thought-provoking, like many of them have been so far. It's a cool class. I want to start out before the questions by defining what class means to me and the perspective I'm coming from. Early in the video, you can tell that class is hard to define. Many people offer different interpretations. Um, One woman said early, quote, "It's all mental. Don't get me wrong, money is important, but it's all mental." And I disagree with that. I think mentality plays a role, but class is inherently money based, and mentality is more of a partner, maybe even a smaller one. Um, I looked up Oxford's definition for class, and it describes, quote, the system of ordering a society in which people are divided into sets based on perceived social or economic status. Um, so you could argue that perception is mental, but the resources needed to shape perception are concrete and directly tied to wealth access. Okay, so the first question in the Bourgeois Blues: why and how are race and class connected? Race and class are connected because different races have historically had different access to wealth and privilege. Black Americans, for example, have faced systemic economic barriers due to slavery, redlining, and civil rights discrimination. These policies created generational disadvantages in wealth accumulation. Meanwhile, white Americans, especially the WASPs mentioned in the video, historically had greater access to education, capital, and opportunity. Given what we know about how race has shaped access to wealth, it's difficult to separate race from class. And race absolutely plays a role in where someone falls economically. Next question is: what class benefits do the Black bourgeois gain by making their social group exclusive? So, one of the middle class Black women describes not being allowed to associate with, quote, white trash from her family. I think that mirrors the elitism of the WASPs and shows how class based exclusion can replicate itself across groups. In terms of what do they gain by making the group exclusive, I think you could argue that exclusivity provides access to better networks, education, career pathways, social capital, which increases chances of success. But to me, that reflects a broader societal problem in that access to opportunity is gated by wealth. The example of Jack and Jill stood out to me as a social incubator for high achieving, well off Black families. Some of the participants defended it as preserving their status. Others criticized it as repeating the exclusivity they once fought against. One woman said, quote, "We fought to be invited to the country clubs, and now we have our own and are doing the same thing." That resonated with me. Wealth and power influence human behavior across race. Exclusivity reinforces hierarchy, even within historically marginalized groups. I don't like class based exclusion. It feels like repeating the same oppressive patterns under a new banner. Um, Tammy's story, the question was: what are her son's chances for class mobility? I think his chances of upward mobility are low, like most people's, but not impossible. To give context, I grew up working class. Neither of my parents went to college. They worked hourly jobs, struggled financially, and my dad had and has a gambling problem. So I was groomed, in a sense, to stay working class. I cooked for years right after high school, peaking at modest wages. Eventually, I went back to school for computer science. After graduating, I spent about 12 years. I experienced about 12 years of financial stability, even pushing upper middle class income at my peak. And I helped my parents financially and experienced a kind of financial peace I'd never known. Now I'm back earning a working class salary, living paycheck to paycheck again, like a large portion of our country does. That shift has given me a unique perspective on class mobility, how hard it is, and how much harder it feels now compared to when I was young. So for Tammy's son, mobility is possible, but difficult. I noticed he mentioned academic and sports awards, which suggests capability that matters. External influences like school, mentors, and just general exposure can change trajectories. I feel for Tammy herself. She's ridiculed by her community and senses her son wants something beyond their lifestyle. That tension is common, especially with social media normalizing luxury lifestyles. I respect her work ethic, walking miles to Burger King while still dreaming of becoming a teacher. The Kentucky girl later in the video also echoed a similar theme, leaving her farm for journalism as a path to another class. But she felt in between the farm lifestyle and the city lifestyle, not fully belonging anywhere. That resonated with me too. I think mobility can create dislocation. For Gnomes Are Us, the question was why is the construction of working class so different between the two accounts? The quote, rednecks or self described rednecks define working class as, quote, people who do 80% of the work for 10% of the pay. That is lived experience. It reflects labor, effort, and economic reality. The WASP description of, quote, rough fabrics, loud, no part in their hair is aesthetic judgment. It reduces class to appearance and stereotypes. One definition comes from people living it, the other comes from observers looking down on it. That's the difference. Lived experience versus detached elitism. Not sure what my time is now. We're at, I don't know. That's all my questions. But I always have a soapbox, something to bring up at the end. I felt like there was one interesting story in the video that I wanted to talk about as well, as I had some direct lived experience with it, and that was the co-op segment, um, where they were talking about the grocery store versus the cooperative grocery store, and the people kind of arguing about the should it come in or should it not. Um, So it hit home for me because I worked on software used by co-ops, and I got pretty familiar with that business structure and how it can help the community and people in it. And I really think the video poorly represented them by framing them mainly as a class conflict. Um, so another example here, worker co-ops that are more common in Europe are, you might have heard of them, they're democratically owned by employees. They can be like employee owned companies, is another word for them. Each worker has equal voting rights regardless of title. Profits are shared and major decisions are voted on. Employee satisfaction tends to be high because ownership and labor are aligned. Grocery co-ops, like the one in the video, operate similarly in principle. You pay a one-time membership fee, often $100 to $300. There's a sliding scale depending on your income, and you can even pay monthly to get to that fee, but it's not like Costco where you're paying annually to re-up. It's you pay it one time, you are a member, you're on the board, sort of. And when you leave, oftentimes those are even refundable. Members vote on major decisions. As you shop, you accumulate patronage dividends, which are small annual returns based on spending and co-op performance. The profits from co-ops are reinvested locally and even into the members rather than flowing to distant shareholders, like big corporate groceries. Prices can be higher on processed goods in co-ops, similar on staple foods, and often competitive or even lower on produce, especially when sourced locally. Co-ops can support regional farmers and circulate money within the community. I understand why the lower income families in the video preferred big chains. I think familiarity and price stability matter a whole lot when you're low income. But co-ops aren't elitist by design. They're a democratic business model that shifts power from corporations to communities, and I really value them as like a way to combat um, economic instability and unfairness in today's society. I think that we are in Marx's like late stage capitalism, and we are democratic socialism looks more and more appealing to me. And I think anything that we can do to shift um, power and wealth from large entities back to smaller ones is typically a good thing. I can talk more about that if anyone wants to. Um, but you've even seen how even our judicial and electoral system is poisoned by wealth being the power mechanism. And I think that specifically being in the middle class, having enough disposable income to make financial decisions based on your values is important. I think some people who are in lower classes don't have the economic freedom to make those kind of choices, but I think it's interesting to consider co-ops as an example of something to buy into that has a good trajectory to healing the inequalities of the financial division in our country. Um, okay, and real quick, just fire off like three little points in case this helps spark more discussion. Um, One man in the video compared America to India's caste system, saying that it's the same, it's just less overt. People are afraid to admit that it is here. I found that interesting. India's caste hierarchy is explicit. America's class hierarchy is more ambiguous yet persistent. I even have a lot of Indian friends who've told me that even in the workforce, your manager, when you mess up, will directly come at you and yell at you and say, "Why didn't you do this?" Whereas in the work culture here, passively observe you make a mistake, come back, give you this like passive aggressive, well, if you don't do good, we're gonna um, like write you up, three strikes, you're in trouble, whatever. It's just very interesting to compare the overt nature of I am here's the class system, I know it exists, versus hey, we collectively don't even know how to define this word. Another one I thought was interesting was a man said in the video, "You can't change classes. You're stuck where you started." I disagree. Obviously, I've moved myself fluidly. It can be done. I think mobility is hard, but not impossible. I'm proof of that. Though I also know how fragile and difficult it can be. Um, and then the final one, almost everyone in the video identified as middle class. That stood out to me. I think we need to be realistic about where we stand economically, and if we want to address inequality honestly, I think we have to be aware of where we are and what that means from a society's perspective, um, and I think it should shape, especially us as social workers, like how to connect with our clients and how to advocate for dissolving inequalities overall. So, thanks.